Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Sales Entrepreneur Podcast. With me today is Diehm. She is a business coach who helps coaches find their niche and helps them grow their business. I'm super happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So we got connected through an amazing few people, and I'm just in town for Phoenix. I'm in town in Phoenix for a couple days. You have this business of helping coaches with their niche, which in and of itself is kind of like a niche thing.
Is it? Yes.
It's kind of a little bit of inception layers going on here. And so, I mean, it's really a unique field. It's an amazing idea. And I'm sure it's taken probably quite a long time to get to that point,
Yes.
right? Same thing
Yes,
kind of
it
with the
has.
social media, quite a few pivots and turns along the way. But ultimately, you're an entrepreneur at heart, right?
Yes.
You're your own boss. I love that. And so, frankly, there's not a lot of female bosses out there. And so I guess as you're getting started, did you have any particular like role models, or what was kind of the thing helping you or driving you to do your own?
I think I always had a little bit of the entrepreneurial spirit in me before. I mean, I've had so many past lives. In one of my past lives, I was a makeup artist and I was doing like theatrical makeup for stage and things like that. And my teacher, she was like going around the room and she was like telling everybody who they are. And she's like, in Rocky, she's like, you're the entrepreneur. I was like, what does that mean? I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what that means. I'd like look it up. I'm like, first of all, how do you spell that? Second of all, like, what is that? So I guess I always had it. I guess people kind of seen that in me. I've always liked to take charge, I guess, even as like a little kid. Like it was just me and my little brother. And I'm always like making up games. I'm always doing this, that, or the other. And of course, changing the rules. So I benefit, as kids do. But I mean, I guess I always maybe kind of had that in me. I guess the entrepreneurial spirit, I guess you could say. Yeah. But it didn't really manifest until way later in my life, where I was trying to just figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't like start out saying, oh, I'm going to have my business. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I had to figure out what was meant for me in this lifetime, what I wanted to do. It was my biggest problem in my life. I'm like, I have analysis by paralysis. Everybody has an opinion on what I should do. Yeah. And everybody's like, you should do this, you should do that. College says this, your parents say this, your friends say this, society says this. And it's just, you're overwhelmed. And I'm like, what do I do with my life?
Was that during college? It sounds like you went to college. So you're going to
Yes.
college, and while you're in college, you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you graduate I guess there isn't, I did graduate in entrepreneurial management, but that was a very new degree at my college. And so I guess what was kind of the turning point for you to kind of find an avenue?
So it was actually in college. I took 2 classes that actually changed my entire life in college, and I took them accidentally. So one of the classes was existentialism, which is basically like the meaning of existence.
Oh, okay.
And that was like an internal mind blown, because it allowed me to question myself and like who am I? Why am I the way that I am? Why do I think the way that I think? Why do I believe the things that I believe? And why do you?
Yeah.
And allowed me to just ask questions of self-discovery within my own self, and allowed me to go, oh, I have choice.
Right.
Because when you grow up, you're given a lot of your beliefs, you're given a lot of your values and how you see the world. So in that moment, I was like, whoa, I can make my own. I was like, what? Who am I? So that one was huge mind-blowing. And so it was like an internal mind-blowing. Then the second one was the science of happiness. And this was like an external mind blown for me, because this allowed me, I'd studied all of these people in this class of the happiest people in the world. And turns out that there are things that people can do that you could live a better and happier life. And I was like, what? So I just went crazy. Like I took, first of all, for both of those classes, I took them like 5 times. I became the teacher's assistant. I was like teaching the class. I just became obsessed with the material, because I was like, why is nobody talking about this? Like this is your life we're talking about. Like we should be talking about these things all the time. So I just became that annoying kid in class. And then I started to, with this information, I just started asking people about like their internal world, their external world. And then that's when I started to asking a lot of the questions of why are people on the paths that they are, and how did they make the decision that they made? Because I'm walking around campus and everybody looks so confident. Oh, I'm going to this class, I'm getting this degree, I'm doing this. I'm like, how do people have all this confidence? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. So I would just I would talk to anybody who would listen to me.
Yeah.
Anyone. I'm like, okay, you're in the line for a snack at the, the concession stand. I'm like, I'm going to ask you about your childhood trauma. Oh, you're trying to get my friend's number. I'm going to see, what are your goals? Why are you going in that direction? What are some things that you tried to do to get there? Oh, you don't like that thing? Okay, well, how could you get that out of your schedule? I would just ask all of these questions to try to get, to answer questions for myself of what is my path and how did you get there? Mm-hmm. And so what ended up being pretty funny was over time, because I would talk to anyone and everyone, over time I started to get feedback on, that really helped me. That really helped me get clarity on my life. I'm going to go ahead and take these action steps now. I'm like, it was? Yeah. I'm like,
so
fantastic.
You asking them questions and them answering it actually gave them clarity. Is
yes.
What you're saying. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I was looking for myself, but turns out it also helped them as well.
You're asking the right questions, and it was provoking them to look inwards, find the answers. And because they were looking inwards and finding the answers and sharing them with you, they were realizing something in themselves, it sounds like.
Yes.
Wow. And so you were kind of discovering this hidden talent that you had that you didn't know.
I guess. I mean, that's kind of what I called it. I'm like, okay, I have this talent, I guess, but what do I call it? I don't know. I don't think I could sign up for something that does this, that helps people get clarity in their lives. Like, what the heck? Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to be a therapist. I don't want to be a counselor. It just didn't feel aligned to me, like the whole profession. Like, I respect it, but it just didn't feel for me. Yeah. So I'm like, what the heck do I do with this? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah. And then that's when, at the time I was in college, I was like super studious, such a good student, and I wasn't watching a lot of TV, but this felt like a grace moment for me. I have no idea why this happened, but I randomly decided to watch Netflix. I randomly decided to go in the documentary section. I randomly decided to watch this documentary about this guy that I knew nothing about, and it ended up being Tony Robbins' documentary, I'm Not Your Guru.
I'm Not Your Guru. Yeah.
Daniel, I have never been struck with lightning so much in my entire life. Yeah. It was just, I was like, who the heck is that? And how the heck do I do that? I was like, that's it. That is literally it. Like, he is doing things for people that I've been doing for people not knowing. Yeah. So I was like, that's it. So then I just became obsessed with his teachings. And then that's what got me introduced to the coaching world. I had never heard of it. And at the time, it's pretty new. Like, now the coaching world is getting more well-known.
It is, yeah.
But back then, I mean, this was just a few years ago, but back then, I had never heard about it. Yeah. I've never heard about any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was just like this whole new world just opened up to me. I was like, I could help people transform their lives deeply. And I don't want to be doing anything else. I found it. It was just such
that's such an amazing gift to like realize in yourself, because you probably saw it as like a very innocent thing that you were doing. Like, oh, I'm just going to go talk to people and I'm just going to ask them deep questions about themselves. Most people would be terrified of that. You know that.
I was a weird girl at the party.
Yeah, but you know that now. I mean, most people are very terrified to be vulnerable and open, because here's the thing. I know that you wouldn't have gotten those answers that you got unless you were also reciprocating that vulnerability and openness.
I think people were open to me because I get that a lot. Like, oh, I've told you things I've never told anybody before. And I think it's because I was just reflecting, like, well, why is that? And I think it's just because I was simply curious. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't trying to get anything out of anybody. I wasn't being like, oh, I hope you say this answer. I'm going to try to, help you see things my way or anything. I was just like, well, like, actually, really, why do you think that? Mm-hmm. And people are like, and then they'd spill the tea, they'd spill everything. And I just had no judgment because I was curious to know.
So what are some of the jobs that you did that kind of helped you gain skills to become a coach?
Well, in business, 100% you have to master sales. So I dove in hard to the world of door-to-door sales.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I guess, how did you get introduced to that?
In a sketchy way.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So my friend, she was like, okay, I know these marketing guys who like have this whole new job, and you're going to make all this money just by like telling people about this thing. And I was like, okay, like
pretty
I can
vague.
Talk to people, whatever. So I show up to like this office, and it was just this guy, and he's like, okay, the job is like so easy. All you do is just like go to these doors and you just tell people that you're advertising, and then you like switch out their security systems. And I was like,
okay. Pitch.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, like I can do that. No problem. So then I just like jumped in. So I was
Really?
like, yeah, okay, yeah.
You just threw
I
on
can
a
do that.
polo.
Threw on a freaking polo and went to Texas. I lived in El
Wow.
Paso and I did that for like 4 months and then went to Michigan and did that. So I was there. So I think it was like the whole summer. It was like, I did this for like 8 months.
Wow. What company was it with?
It was with North Star.
Oh,
Do you know North Star?
Yeah. I'm from Utah originally, so yeah.
Okay,
I
what
know
do you
North
think
Star.
about North Star?
No, I mean are they in business still? I can't remember.
I have no idea. I
Yeah.
have no idea.
We'll have to fact check that afterwards. No, it's funny because I was with Vivint for years.
You were our competition.
Yeah.
I would be on the lookout for Vivint. Vivint, I'm coming for you.
Well, the funny thing is, I don't know if you know the headquarters of North Star, where it is in Utah.
No, I don't.
It's
I know
right
it's there, but
down
I don't
the
know where it
street
is.
from where the Vivint headquarters are.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Like quite literally, I think within like 2 miles.
That's so funny. Hey, guys.
So we would pass by the North Star office every single time
That's
on the
so
way to like our
funny.
Vivint office and stuff. So no, it was a healthy competition, absolutely. I transitioned to solar sales,
Oh, okay.
but I was doing security sales for 7 years. Yeah,
Wow.
So it was a really long
Okay, so
time.
you know even way more than I do.
I did it through
gosh.
college. I guess you did it right after college, it sounds
Yes,
like, right?
mhm.
So after college, you went into it. I did it through college and then decided, hey, you know what? Instead of just leaving this and going and being an entrepreneur, because I graduated in entrepreneurial management, I'm like, I am an entrepreneur. And so I'm just going to go ahead and keep doing this. I'm going to embrace it full-heartedly. And then I've been doing a lot of different side businesses on the side. And so I've learned to embrace the door-to-door sales industry
go.
and the company and so forth. So did you only work with them for 8 months?
That was it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
What kind of lessons did you learn while you were doing door-to-door?
Sales. I mean,
Yeah.
they just threw me out there and they're like, figure it out. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And so, and it was such a big journey for me because I was only, I think there were 75 people who started in the summer, 75, and I was one of 7 who stayed.
Wow.
And I was the only girl after a week.
Wow.
Yeah, there was like 4 other girls, I think, and they all left after a week. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right, and I already decided I was going to do this. So I'm like, we're doing it.
Right.
So yeah, and I was so surprised because, I mean, I felt pretty cool. I was like, okay, I'm the only girl here. Let's freaking go. And then I was like top sales in the company like multiple times. And I was like, girls represent. And I was like, let's go. It was so fun. And I learned a lot. I learned how to talk to anybody and everybody because you have to get comfortable in any uncomfortable situation. Oh, you're watering your plants? Hi, what are you guys doing? You have to
Yeah.
find your way in. And yeah, you just have to just learn how to connect with people and sell anything.
Wow.
And it was huge because I had a lot of different sales positions before, and I actually did quite well at sales. I think just because I love connecting with people, and so sales was always fun and easy for me. I'd always like win these like sales competitions when I worked at like makeup counters and different things like that.
Yeah.
But this was a different level of sales. So you're outside knocking on doors, and I'm by myself, and I'm like this young little girl. I'm like, So I'm like, okay, and so you just get thrown in the waters, and yeah, I came back.
Well, I mean,
knowing
it
sales.
sounds like you kind of had to figure it out on your own. What
Totally.
did you do to kind of? And it sounds like you had a little bit of sales background,
Mm-hmm.
but what are some of the things you did, or what's a lesson that you learned about yourself as you just figured it out on your own?
Just keep going until you figure it out, and then ask people for help.
Yeah,
That
which
was
is what
it.
it sounds like you're really good at. Voicing your concerns, voicing your opinion, and also asking for help.
And it was mostly just making the decision to do it because I was surrounded by people who were dropping like flies.
Yeah.
So I always had that in my ear of like, oh, I'm leaving. Oh, this sucks. Oh, like it's everybody else's fault why I'm not getting sales. Da-da-da-da. Like this was a constant in my head, but I was just like, no, I decided I'm doing this for the summer.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna eventually figure it out. So I'll just stay. And then people kept dropping, and I was just like, I'm staying,
Yeah.
And then eventually, because I decided to stick with it, I eventually became relatively good, way better than my first store. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How many times did you hear, "Oh, she's only killing it because she's a girl"?
I think everybody changed their tune as soon as they saw my strategy because
Oh.
also because I had to have a totally different approach than everybody else.
course.
All the other guys that I was working with were like 6'4", big old guys, and they would just come with the authority piece. They're just like, "Hi, I know what I'm talking about. Here's a security system." People are like, "Okay, I can't do that, you know? So my approach was totally different. You know, mine was just like, hi, like, I remind you of your daughter. They're like, oh my gosh, come in. And I was like, great, you know?
Nice.
So like, but also my pitch was different. It was so funny that like at the beginning, we'd always have every morning, we'd have like a morning meeting and everybody would go in front of the class, you know, our whole group and like do their pitch. And they never asked me to come to the front, but I just kept getting all these sales. But they never asked me to come to the front. And they thought probably, I'm assuming they just wrote it off because I'm a girl.
Yep.
And so when they're like, you know what, we haven't heard Raquel come up, like let's hear your pitch. And I was like, okay. And I go up and I show my pitch and I turned around and everyone's jaws were on the ground. And they were like,
that works.
no, but it was like good. And then they all started like to pick it up and then they started to use it themselves. So like, yeah, I think it was because I was not threatening, of course, that was to my advantage, but also it was just how I positioned it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you do what most of the best salespeople in the entire industry do, is that you just first focus on relating with the customer.
Yes.
And then you focus on the sales part of it afterwards, which if you had a good manager, they would have trained you to do that
I didn't get
from the
trained
get-go.
super well.
So it's amazing that you were able to pick that up on your own, because a lot of guys flake out before they ever come to that realization or before
It's
they
hard.
ever master it. It's not easy.
It's
No.
not easy. It's not for the weak.
You have to be a chameleon. You have to be able to relate with anybody and everybody about anything.
What's the biggest thing that you get from door-to-door sales?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that chameleon aspect of it, literally, it's like, hey, you put me in a room with anybody and I'm going to learn to connect with them, right? Kind of like the things that you talked about earlier, that you were able to talk to people at the bar and learn about them and get them to share things about themselves that maybe they didn't even know and come to a lot of realizations. It's the same thing that you probably learn. Sales is communicating with people, asking them efficient questions, and being able to relate with them on, and a lot of sales are going to relate with them on a superficial level, but the best salespeople can actually relate with them on a more deep level. Yeah. And so, for example, I don't know anything about cars. I've never been in the military. I've never done a lot of things, but it doesn't matter. I can go into a home with a car enthusiastic person and I can relate with them on maybe something else that no one else would, right? And so it's the ability to see people and connect with them in a way that other people don't. And that's a skill that most salespeople, it takes a long time to get. And even harder, it's learning how to take that skill and apply it to business and apply it to life.
Yeah. I feel like sales is just a way of life.
Yeah.
Because everything that you're doing is selling. And I feel like there's two different paths of selling. There's like learning to purely connect to the other person and then actually helping them. And that's just relating to the other person. Then the other one is manipulating them into the sale. And you can get really good at both of those, you know, because I've read books that I'm like, oh, like this guy's the top, da 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 da. And I'm like, this is straight up manipulation. Yeah. Like this is how do you get them? How do you trap them? Yeah. And I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, that's
it's
not going to help
connection.
anyone. It's false connection. But then when you read other things that are like, oh, I'm at the top, but I actually care about the other person. I want to help them. This is how I do it without feeling weird about it.
Yes.
Those are the ones where I'm like, oh, got it. And
you want to know what the biggest indicator is if one person is either a manipulator or a seller?
Ooh, what?
Their retention rate.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that would make sense.
You take a look at their retention rate. And then there's other factors that go into it. I know a few salespeople who are very extremely unique people, and they just connect with people on a crazy level, and they're really enthusiastic, and they just kind of sign them up, and then the customer gets buyer's remorse later. Yeah. That's a little bit differently. We're talking about someone who's just like a kind of a salesperson who is trying their hardest, and unfortunately they fall into one of those two categories where they start learning manipulative tactics, or they start learning really how to connect with people. And the biggest indication of that is their retention rate. How do people feel after you leave the house? Because after you have a coaching call with them, for example, if you have like that initial coaching call with them and you come across as like a scammer or as like seeking their money or desperation,
or you just don't care,
things like that, or that you don't care. Yeah. When you get off the phone call, how they feel and the feeling that you left them with is going to determine if they stick with you or not.
Totally.
And so that's what a lot of people need to focus on is like, hey, yeah, like I can say these things and they could be laughing with me in the moment, but what feeling am I leaving them with?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to show you how good of a coach, how good of a salesperson, how good of a partner you're going to be in life.
I'm a strong believer that everyone should learn sales.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone should at least be like have some kind of sales job, or even just being a waitress, like selling food, like anything.
Yeah.
You got to know how to sell something, because life is sales.
Life is
Everything.
sales.
Hey, where do you want to go this weekend to, what movie do you want to watch? What food do you want to have? Like everything is sales, or even just selling yourself on yourself.
Yep, exactly.
Like,
which is coaching.
It's coaching.
Absolutely.
It's 1,000% coaching. I remember, and this was a time that had nothing to do with sales, but it felt like it had everything to do with sales. At one point is when I was actually hosting an event, and I was in front of this. It was an audience of people that I knew nothing about.
Oh.
It was for cars. They were about, I knew nothing about their industry. They were just like tinting cars. And I was like, I'm the host. I'm the one, I'm your best friend, like, let's get together, da da da. And so I do this host this whole event. And people were coming up to me. They're like, oh, how long have you been with the company? I was like, 5 minutes, like I haven't been here. And they're like, oh, you haven't been in the industry? I'm like, no. I'm like, I know nothing about anything in this world. And I just blew everyone's minds. And I was like, it sells. Because I just sold them on like, this is who's coming up. This is what we're learning. This is what's happening. I just sold them kind of on growth.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
that was it. And they're like, oh, you must know what you're talking about. I'm like, no.
And that's the point too, is like, it's okay, because you're not the person that's actually, like, you're the facilitator.
I'm the
right?
facilitator.
And so
I didn't need to know.
Your whole point is to step out of the way and to highlight the people that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the point too, is a lot of the times people look at themselves. It's like, listen, sometimes you have to step out of the way and like highlight the product. Sometimes you need to sell yourself. And learning the difference between those two is really important. Because, like, people are going to buy you, not always the product. But sometimes they're just going to buy the product and they don't give a crap about you. Yeah. And you need to learn those two, and you got to learn when it's applicable and when it's not.
That is the hardest part, actually, in coaching.
Oh, is it?
Is sales.
Yeah.
And it's because people feel like that they're selling themselves, especially in the beginning. Because if I have a security system, I'm like, isn't it great? Look at all its bells and whistles. But when you're selling a coaching program, you're like, I made this. And I don't know, especially when you're new, you're like, and I don't know if it's any good. Do you want to sign up?
But I have it.
Yeah, but I have it. And I was wondering if you wanted to pay me money to like go through it. So people feel really awkward and uncomfortable. And when and so they like come with that nervous energy. They're like, you wouldn't want to go through this, would you? And then when somebody says no, it feels like a personal rejection.
Right.
Like they're like, and then they flirt with identity. Yeah. I'm not meant to do this. I'm not meant to be a coach. My program doesn't work. My story isn't good enough. And then they flirt with the identity, and then they end up staying there. And it's fine if you want to flirt with an identity of like, hey, this was a bad day, but don't stay there. You got to get back up. We like to think that growth is so linear. Whoop, it goes in a straight line. Oh, no. It goes up and down and up and down. We want trend to be our friend. We want to go in that direction, but it goes up and down and up and down. So when people are in that low moment, it's usually because in the beginning is because they got so excited. I made my coaching program. Let's do it. Here you go. Do you want it? And they're like, no. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, because they don't have that sales background, and they don't understand that they're not the ones being rejected. It's the product.
It's the end destination.
Well,
what do they want to achieve? Yeah.
They can't separate themselves from the product because they created the product, which makes it even harder. So when you're the one who created the product,
here's my baby.
You, and this is it. And when they say no, they're saying no to everything that you've created. And no, they're saying no to the product. And they're saying no to your salesmanship because you just didn't do a good job selling. Which leads back to what we were talking about. What you do now is not only do you help people find their niche, but you also help them sell that niche to the people that are going to be their potential clients.
100%. It's totally stepping into your own confidence, because now you're owning it. Because a lot of the times these people come and they're like, I went through this crazy thing. And then when they're like, I'm ready to help other people go through this transformation. And so I help them go through it. Okay, we're going to create it. We're going to take your whole story and we're going to make it a thing. Like that's so fun, by the way. It's like, oh my gosh, I have like a thing to sell, Yeah. So we like create this product, and then they're about to go sell it, and they get so excited. And then I don't know what to do with it, you know? And then it feels like so weird. And then they feels like this personal rejection. And then people don't really want to move forward because it feels so personal to them. Like it just feels like weird and uncomfortable. So yeah, it's a whole journey. But if they just stick with it and they own that part of themselves because they're looking at it as like, as something that's like separate from themselves, but it's also something that's connected to themselves. So when they do this, it's owning a part of their past in the sense. So there's somebody who I went through personally who went through a crazy divorce, and they're like, I could help somebody navigate like nobody's business. And so I'm like, all right, you're going to talk about this stuff now. And she's like, oh, I have to talk about this? I'm like, well, yeah, you know, you're going to have to talk about this and if you want to help people. And so she's like, oh my gosh, I really have to own this part of my life, don't I? I'm like, yes, you do. So it also helps people own themselves and create so much more confidence in themselves because now they're being the strong one for other people. So it really helps people. Like I always say that starting a business is the most personal development and spiritual journey you're ever going to be on because it's going to require things from you that nothing else is going to require, including a lot of ownership of yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ed Milet says it best. You're most qualified to help the person that you were. Yeah.
Yep. That's what every single one of my coaching clients, that's what they're doing. Every single one.
Do you feel like you made great connections or maybe better connections with the people who were open with you? And I'm guessing you were open with them as well if they would ever ask questions, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you were built like good relationships with those people?
I mean, the people who remained in my life, absolutely. You know, I have a lot of close friends who feel that strong connection and feel like they can be really open and deep and vulnerable. And I do the same for them. You know, that's a close friend, like an inner circle friend.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd be having deep conversation with people at the bar that I'll never see ever again.
Wow. That's
you know,
crazy. Yeah.
And they're like, wow, you know, what kind of conversation are we having right now? I'm like, I don't know, a good one. You know?
A good one. Let's keep it going.
And then I'd never see them ever again, you know? So like whoever was willing to talk to me, we're talking.
Yeah, but they leave with something greater that they know about themselves. You leave with something greater with, you know, either experience in helping somebody or you know, knowledge and a way to go. It is interesting, though, out of all the people that you, I guess, interviewed in a way,
I guess.
asked questions, it's like instead of taking any of their answers and trying to follow that path, which is what you're looking for, you created your own path. And you're like, oh, well, and instead of like doing what these people are doing per se, you know, maybe you talk to like an art major and they said, oh, I'm an artist because X, Y, and Z. Instead of changing your life and saying, oh, I'm going to be an artist too, you were staying true to yourself and you were trying to find yourself. And that's what led you in the direction of, hey, you know what? Actually, what I'm excelling at is helping these people. And I want to keep doing that.
Yeah, I think I was just unintentionally looking for patterns because I wasn't like, oh, you're an art major? Okay, let me cling to that because I don't want to be an art major.
Yeah.
You know, but I was just more curious on how did you get here? Because some people I feel like are born with something that they always feel like that they were destined to do. Like, oh, ever since I was little, I wanted to be an artist. You know, ever since I can remember, this was my path. But I feel like a lot of the times, especially now, there's so many things that you can do. And it's not, I mean, like, think about like years and years and years ago. It was like, all right, doctor, lawyer, you know, accountant, you know, there's like basic jobs. Now there's jobs being made up out of thin air because of technology and all of that. So I just thought that was just so interesting. So I was just looking for patterns. I was like, well, how did you come to that conclusion? You know, like, were you always like this? Or did you somehow figure this out by doing some kind of calculation that I'm not aware about? So
absolutely.
It was just like unintentional research for me at the time.
Well, the funny thing that I have learned from hearing a lot of entrepreneurs' stories is you kind of get to this point where you're searching, what do you want to do? And then you get this kind of Tony Robbins aha moment that you had. And it's almost a daunting thing because on one hand, you're super excited that you found something you're passionate about. You love what he's doing. You want to do something similar. But then on the other hand, you face the problem that most people have where you're like, how the heck do I do that?
Oh, yeah. Step 2.
So it's like the passion precedes knowing how to even do it, which is usually the opposite way. You learn how to do something and then you get very passionate about it. With entrepreneurs, I've found that it's almost always the opposite.
Yeah,
you
that's
find
a great
kind of
observation.
this passion and then you're like, okay, now I got to go figure it out.
Yeah.
And so maybe you watch this Netflix documentary and what's the next step?
Oh boy, did I go on a journey. Okay, so the decision was made, and I remember at the time that was step 1 was like my prayer to God for years. I was like, just tell me what to do. I was like, I just need a path and then I'll walk it. And of course, then the prayer gets answered. I'm like, how the heck do I walk it?
Yeah,
like, how the heck do I do this? Thank you. Actually, I'm going to need some additional help. So at that point, I was just obsessed. I was all in. I started my quote unquote business at the time, if you could even call it that.
Yeah.
So I'm taking all these courses, learning all these things on how to do it like the right way, you know, because I guess there was like structure behind this. Because I had this random passion, but passion without structure is going to be dead.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's the structure behind all of this stuff? So I was doing all these courses, all of this stuff. And still at the time, my niche was still very vague at the time. I just knew I liked helping people. The most vague niche in the entire world.
Yes.
What the heck is that? So I just knew I liked to help people, but I was like, all right, we're open for business. Do I know what I'm doing? Absolutely not. Can I help you? I don't know, maybe. You want to try? Like that was kind of like my approach to things.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like started to brand myself at this way, I guess, and I'd still have these deep conversations with people and whatnot, and changed my Instagram bio to coach, even though that meant nothing.
Nice.
Meant
Yes.
nothing at the time, but I'm like, I'm going to act the
I
part.
made it official though.
I made it official,
Yes.
even though there was nothing official behind the title, but I wanted to take some kind of steps. So yeah, I went all in on this, and I remember there's so many places I could take this story, but I'll give you the fun highlights.
Okay.
So there was a time where, I started out as a mindset coach. It was kind of like life coach / mindset / transformational coach. You can see how clear I was.
Yeah.
And so I actually got started getting my first clients. This is very helpful for people who maybe are wanting to get started but don't know how to get their first clients. This actually really put me in a position of authority. So first, I just, talked to any of my friends and see if they'd go through my program because I just needed to test it out to give it
Some
proof.
experience, yeah.
Yeah. And then there was somebody through the grapevine heard that I was a coach. And so they asked me to speak at their event. And I was like, yes, I'll speak at your event. 100%. Let's go. So I spoke at their event, and at this time, I'm looked at a place of authority right now because people are like, oh, yes, you're speaking on stage. How fancy, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And so what I did at the end of the event, I did a giveaway. And I said, I am doing a giveaway and there was like raffles. And I put 3 of my full coaching programs in there, like 3-month transformational journeys in there. And so when people won, they were almost like crying. They were like, oh my gosh, like I manifested this. I was like, girl, I manifested this. I was like, us both, so, but it was perfect because they were in a position to be like, yes, I'm a really good client. I'm ready to go. And I'm like, perfect. Yeah. I'm ready to coach you. And we all went all in on all of those things. Wow. So I was able to test out my program, see if it worked, see how, if it did what I want it to do, if I need to update things, change things, all of that. Wow. And so I got to that point where I was able to, have something. So I'm like, great. And I got a little bit too confident at this point. I got a few clients. And at this point, I was working at a very rundown apartment complex as a leasing agent because I just needed to pay the bills.
Yeah, you need a job.
Yeah, I needed a job. I'm not getting paid, I need to pay rent.
Yeah.
So I'm working at this apartment complex, and I got to this point where I had I think I signed on 5 people or something at this point. I don't know how I pulled it off. I just made it happen. And I was taking these calls in my lunch break. I was printing out things. I don't know how I got away with this, but I was printing out course material. Then my boss would go over to the printer and be like, here's your coaching stuff. And I'm like, sorry. I was just 100% in coaching and not on my job at all.
Yeah.
And so I got to a place where I was getting kind of a little busy, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, did I just make it?
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I put in my 2 weeks.
Wow.
I put in my 2 weeks. I'm like, let's go. I'm a coach. I'm going all in. I took all my clients at the time. I think I had 5 on this retreat to Sedona. And I was like, I'm doing this whole thing. And I went all in and gave away everything. And then a couple of them, I think one backed out, and then another one could only make so many payments or whatever. And that was all I was relying on.
Yeah.
I quit too soon. I would not recommend this strategy, but it was a sink or swim type of situation. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll figure this out. I don't know. And so I'm still being a coach. I'm still doing my own thing. And I'm doing gigs on the side, but my heart is 1,000% in this, but it's not just the most profitable thing in the world.
Right.
And I'm still not incredibly clear about exactly who I'm serving and exactly how I'm serving them. I just help people make their lives better. That's the basic thing I could tell you.
Yeah.
Then at this point, this was another like godsend moment in my life. At this point, so I'm mindset coaching. And at this time, I've coached enough people where I feel confident in my abilities. I'm like, this will help you. You know, I can't tell you what it is.
Yeah, you're
Couldn't
able to sell it a
explain
lot
it.
better to people. Like, hey, I really can help you. You're probably getting a lot more people who are more invested into your program, I'm guessing, because of that and your confidence in it.
Yes. Like, I mean, it was just the same amount of confidence that I had when I was talking to people at the bar. You know, I was just like, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a conversation, and I promise you it's going to change your life. Like, some of the transformations that would happen would be amazing. Like, there was this one girl, her life changed completely in 3 months.
Wow.
It was amazing. Like, it just happened right before my eyes. And if anyone's a coach and you experience this, you know what it feels like. And you're just like, you see somebody's life transform in front of your eyes. It's the most beautiful feeling ever. Yeah. And she, like, her boyfriend was like, and I know him from, because my marketing game was like non-existent back then. I was just grassroots. And like, her boyfriend, I knew from high school, said, hey, my girlfriend's like going through something. Can you like help her? And it was such an awkward situation because I'm like, hey girl, like, your boyfriend sent me to fix you. It was so funny. But like, she ended up agreeing. She didn't have a job. She had a terrible relationship with her family. Her boyfriend and her were like about to break up, and she didn't have a job. She didn't have anything. And she was super depressed and had a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. Like, she was in a rut. Yeah. And in 3 months, she was a completely different woman. Yeah. Like, her and her boyfriend got back together. They're now married, which is a beautiful thing. Wow. She had a new relationship with her family and her dad. She got a job, and she got one that she was in alignment to where she ultimately wants to go. Mm-hmm. She got off of her anxiety medication, her depression medication. She knows how to handle it. She, instead of getting them like once every, 3 times a day, she got it like once a month, and she knew how to get out of it. Like, she was a completely different person. And I was like, this is amazing. So I felt confident in my abilities. I just had no idea, like, how to describe it. You know, like, what am I doing for people?
Yeah.
Like,
well, that shows the talent, right? I mean, you had a talent, you had a knack for it, and obviously a passion for it, right? And I feel like that's the biggest thing. No one should ever go into being an entrepreneur or starting a business for the sake of making money on it, frankly. If that's the goal, then I'm sorry, but that's probably going to be a bad business, or you're going to be very disappointed with the outcomes. Mm-hmm. So it sounded like you found something you're passionate about. Yeah. And I mean, coaching, other than Tony Robbin, who's the #1 coach in the entire world, especially a couple of years ago, it wasn't very well known that you can make great money by doing coaching.
No. He pretty much invented it.
Yeah, he invented it. But I mean, if you look at like other types of coaches, it's not necessarily an industry where money is the flashy object. I mean, look at high school coaches, look at sports coaches. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, of course you have the professional coaches, but even still, no one grows up and says, hey, I want to be NBA professional coach, right? They say, I want to be the players and so forth.
Sure.
So it shows a lot to me about your character that you were seeking something that you were passionate about, you found it, and you made steps towards it, regardless of necessarily what the financial outcome would be. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds like the path that you were on.
Well, step number 1, I just wanted to do what felt in alignment to me. And I think this was when I did the Science of Happiness course, I was like, happiness is my number 1. Because there was all these other jobs I could do that could make like really good money. And I was like, I would want to die. I was like, I'm just not going to be sitting in an office. Like, that just does not sound fun and exciting to me. So like, happiness is a huge value of mine, but also financial freedom is as well. And this is something that, like, if we can, when we pivot to the business side of things, because I had a nice pivot there, is that, like, I always say, like, your niche is a relationship. It's what you feel aligned with, and then also what the market's willing to pay for. When you have both of them, you're going to have a successful business. Like, and it has to start with step 1, like, what you feel alignment with. Like, you have to like what you're doing. You have to want to help people. Your ingredient is you actually have to care about what you're doing. Then and only then you want to see how profitable that it is. And if it aligns, great, now you have a business. But if you do something where you start with its profitability and you only do it because it's profitable in coaching, because you're literally helping people, if you don't want to help those people, it's going to be an unsustainable business because you're not going to want to continue to do it. Like, a requirement for coaching, because you are helping people very intimately, is you have to care about what you're doing. Otherwise, it's not going to work. That does not mean that it's not financially, like, you can be be financially free in this. There's so many coaches, 6, 7, 8-figure coaches who do incredibly well. And that's still a value of mine. Like I still want to eat. I like nice things.
Absolutely,
like I'm trying to be financially free here as well, but I'm also doing that and I have those goals because it's a reflection of the value that I'm giving. So I'm like, great, I'm going to feed people, but I also want to be fed as well. So it's like, it's a relationship.
Yeah, because in order to be in alignment, you have to be living according to your values. Right?
Yes.
You can't have one without the other.
100%.
So a friend of mine was talking about how, listen, you first need to figure out what your values are. If you're struggling to find alignment in your life with what you're doing for work and so forth, first find your values. Decide how you're going to live according to them, and then you're going to start to find alignment. Mm-hmm. And if you don't necessarily have alignment right then, at least you'll have a good idea of what to start looking for. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the tricky thing comes with entrepreneurism. You talked about the time period that you were doing a job and you're growing the business. A lot of people are forced to do, and as you advise people to do a job that they don't like for quite a long time, so that way they can do something that they're aligned with and that they enjoy. So I guess what kind of pieces of advice do you have for people who you feel for them, right? I mean, I feel for them too. It's like, hey, I know you're not doing something you necessarily love right now, but keep making time on the side for the things that you want to do. What advice do you have for people who are in that situation right now?
Oh, yeah. I would 100% make sure that you are stable, meaning that you have a job. Even if you don't enjoy it, have a job. Have some income coming in. Because what you don't want to happen is that you are approaching clients with a scarcity mindset. That means you're talking to people being like, you need to buy because I need to pay my rent, not because you're wanting to genuinely help them. Yeah. Now you're out of alignment. Does this work? Is this a match? It is fantastic. Let's move forward. But if it's not, you don't want to feel that weird, devil over your shoulder being like, you need to pay rent. You should, make them sign up. Yeah. Like, that's not going to be sustainable. Like, that's not going to work.
Right? I mean, that's the idea.
And people can feel that a mile away.
Absolutely.
So definitely not. So it's definitely good to have some kind of stable income coming in so that you can think clearly and act in accordance to your values inside of your business. And people have different types of things that they need, depending on what business that they're starting. With coaching, you really don't need a whole lot to get started, like which is amazing. Like, you don't have to get a store. You don't have to get employees. Right. You don't have to get things to put on the shelf, like inventory. You don't have to get all of these things. You literally just need your phone. You need a laptop. Okay, that's not all you need. You definitely need to have the right mindset. You need to have strategy. You need things for sure. You need to be the right
person as well. But the tools are at your disposal.
Yes.
Right? And so that kind of leads me to the second conundrum that people run into as they're getting started is, okay, let's say I've kind of saved up enough money to the point where I can transition to becoming an entrepreneur. They make that jump. And I know that you've been in this process too, where maybe you're in a place where you feel alignment, but you're not making money. Maybe you're not making the money that you want to be making. And let's say you've tried a couple different times to adjust and pivot to make more money. I guess, what advice do you have for people who are like, hey, it's great that you're living in alignment with what you want to do for work and you're passionate about it, but if one of your values, I suppose, and I don't just mean monetary things, but like time freedom comes from financial stability, things like that. If those things are important to you and the financial side of entrepreneurism isn't there, then how do you help people kind of fill that gap?
You just got to find a way to fill those values because we have different needs as humans. Like, one of them is certainty and one of them is stability and another one is freedom. We want to, and that's freedom to create, freedom to be in alignment. Like, say you have a passion for underwater basket weaving and it gives you the most joy in the entire world and you're obsessed with it, but it makes you no money and it doesn't give you any time back. It doesn't give you any freedom. It doesn't give you any of those things. Okay, well, where can that fit inside of your life where you can still enjoy that? And then how can you fulfill those values in other areas of your life? Okay, so if you value financial stability, okay, well, what are some things that you can do during the day that can do that? And if that's a job that you don't enjoy, try to do one that you don't absolutely despise, but one that's going to give you what you ultimately want. I mean, that's what we're all here to do, is get to your ultimate goal. Otherwise you're just after dopamine. What do I just want to do today? I only want to do things that are fun and exciting and da-da-da-da. Okay, you're going to burn out, or you're not going to, create sustainable long-term things, results, like if you have to do something that you don't like in order to get to somewhere that you want to get to tomorrow, I mean, that's a great trade-off. It just depends on what you're willing to do to get that. You know, some people aren't willing to do what it takes to get to that end destination, you know, so they'll just do something now. And that's not saying that that's good or bad, just some people have different values. Some people have different wants, different desires. But if you do really have a very strong desire to be financially free and to have all the time in the world to do that, okay, well, what is that going to look like for you? You know, are you willing to do that? That's a real conversation you have with yourself. You know, is it yes or is it no? If you're not, okay, whatever the decision that is, you got to own it and you got to step into it and know that that's what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tough conversation. I wish you could say you could have everything that you would ever want right now, but that's just not the case.
Well, I know for a fact that you definitely, to get to where you are now, you've had to have those conversations with yourself and you've had to ask yourself those questions. So kind of going back to your story a little bit, it was really interesting. You kind of had these clients, you started picking up momentum and so forth. I guess maybe what was the next hard decision where you had to ask yourself, am I going to keep doubling down on this, or am I going to maybe not quit, but like let off the gas?
I think where things really changed for me is when this was like my dream job that I didn't know existed at the time, but I got asked to join mastermind.com, which was Tony Robbins and Dean Graciosi's company that they just brought together. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I was like, oh my gosh. And they just opened up, and I'm in Phoenix, and they opened up their studio in Arizona. It was right down the street from me.
Wow.
And they just hired on, and I had no idea that it existed. And they just hired on their main coach, and their main coach who's just about to build out their coaching team. And he knew one of my coaching friends. And my coaching friend knew I was all about Tony Robbins. That's where I've learned so much about, learn about coaching, all of this stuff. And so she's like, oh, this has Rocky's name all over it. So he called me up and he was like, hey, do you want to come in and interview for as a mindset coach for the company? And I was like, are you free right now? It's like, I am so there. It was like my absolute dream job. Yeah. So I came, and when that was just like a pivot for me, because at that time I still had my business and I still didn't want to let it go, but I was so invested into learning everything behind the scenes of all, like, the person who's at the top. Yeah. So it's like, that's my number one priority right now. I was like, what are you doing back here? Show me the secrets. Whatever you got to do, I want to be in 1,000%. Yeah. So that's where it was like a major pivot for me. I still had my business, but my priority shifted a little bit because I felt like I was going to school.
Yeah, you're in learning mode again.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of humility too to go from a place where, hey, I'm the boss, I'm the coach, I'm creating, to back to, hey, you know what? I'm going to be humble enough to take a step back and learn more. And eventually, I'm sure that the ultimate goal is to help your clients at the maximum capacity. Mm-hmm. How can I help my clients the best?
Yeah.
And you knew, hey, if I continue to work on myself, that's only going to help my clients in the future as you continue to grow your business.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So you were with Tony Robbins for a few years?
Yeah, a few years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you learned just so much great stuff.
Yes.
And so you were doing the coaching business on the side. How did your coaching business do while you were doing the Tony Robbins? How much of a time requirement was Tony Robbins thing?
It was like back and forth. Like I would basically be at Mastermind during the day. It would be like my 9 to 5, and I was so happy to be there every single day. I was like birds chirping. I was like, let's go to work. I just loved it. And then at night, I'd have all my coaching clients. Wow. So it kind of just worked, and they'd kind of feed into each other. But I had a major transition when I was there because it just started. Like, I was there with the main guy. We helped put together the whole coaching team. We built everything together, and the business was new. So we shifted as coaches in there really quickly. I got hired on as a mindset coach, but the business itself shifted from a lot of more mindset to business. Mm-hmm. So then I'm learning all this stuff about business. So I'm like, okay, feed it to me. I'm like, let's go. And so the thing that was a huge aha moment for me was I was talking to all these people who wanted to be coaches. And so they wanted to help people, but they just didn't know how to do it. They didn't have a vehicle. Oh. And so business is that vehicle. And so I'm like, okay, that's it. There's all these people who found out their path that they wanted to go, which was I was helping a lot of people do in the past. What's your path? What do you want to do? And these people knew it. They're like, I have a story, I have a transformation, and now I have all of this knowledge that I want to give to people, and I want to help people transform in this way. I just have no idea how to do it. And my knowledge was limited at the time. I was like, I know how I got here, but like, let's learn from the big guy, like let's learn from him. So I'm learning all of this information. And of course, Tony and Diehm, busy guys. I started taking over. There's a portion where I was doing all the lives, I was doing all the trainings. They'd see my face way more than they would see everybody else. So like I had to teach all of this stuff all the time. And I'd have one-on-one clients, groups, huge, like thousands and thousands of people. Like we're doing these massive events and all of this. So I'm like dialed in, I'm like, I know exactly what we got to do, this, then, or the other. And I was feeling really confident in my abilities. And then, I just got this new passion for business.
Yeah.
So it totally switched. I was like, this is the path. Like, this is what you got to do. It's the necessary requirement in order to help the people that you feel like that you were born to serve. Like, this is living on purpose.
Was the passion equal to the passion of like the coaching and so forth, or was it comparable?
It was coaching. So like it felt the same to me. Nice. I was like, it just felt like it was like the next step. It was like, now I know how to connect to people so deeply. And because I knew how to do that, when I'd connected with somebody and they'd tell me exactly where they've been and where they wanted to go in business, I was able to connect it so easy. I was like, oh, okay, we just got to plug this in and plug this in because you want this and you don't want this and da-da-da-da. And it just became like puzzle pieces for me. Wow. So it just became fun. I was like, okay, well, let's get you some clients. Like, let's set up your structure. Let's set up this. Let's set up that. And it would just make people so excited because a lot of these people were living lives that they thought that they needed to or they valued, different things in the past. And now they're at this point where they're like, I want to do something else. I want to do something for me. I really want to give impact to the world. And this was their way to do that. So when there was somebody who had all this beauty inside of them, but they had no one to share it with, when they finally got to do that, they like lit up. They're like, this is it. And I was like, I love coaches. So I was like, I love working with these people. Yeah. These people are on fire for their thing.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that.
Well, you could see yourself in them too, because just a few years earlier, you went through that same process, same fire, same excitement. And so you're like, okay, you had gotten to the point where you had learned so much from Tony Robbins and that program that you're like, hey, I can pass this on to coaches as well and help coaches. And so now you specifically, niche is like got to be your favorite word.
Oh yeah, niche, potato, tomato, tomato.
Niche. And so that's what you do.
That's what I do.
You help business coaches, and I guess businesses as well, or mainly just coaches?
Mostly just coaches. The same things apply, like the same principles apply. So I help so many different types of people do that, but my main people are the coaches. Absolutely, yes.
Because when you go into businesses, that's kind of more like advertising, almost like, hey, who's your niche market, and then that almost be like who you're advertising to. It's a little bit different of a thing. You're helping coaches find out, I guess, what part of coaching that they should dial down in, or what part of, I guess, what thing do you help them in with their coaching programs?
I help them get so crystal clear on their messaging. And this could be the same thing for big companies, for businesses. Like, it's the same exact type of process. I just love working with coaches because they love helping people, and I'm like, I get it, So, but basically it's just getting clear on what is in your head and how can you communicate that to who you're speaking to in a way that they understand. And that goes through everything, because people are like, oh, I just want to help people. Because that was me. I just want to help people. I just don't know how to say it. How do I say what's in my head and say it clearly? And so I just developed the skill that when somebody sits down for me for 90 minutes, oh, you know exactly who you're serving, how you're serving them, the exact transformation that you're giving. So like we get clarity on that, and then that reflects in any kind of offer that you have immediately, or your coaching program, and that reflects on how you're communicating to them. So that's sales, that's marketing, that's everything. Wow. So everything is derived from there. And a lot of people skip this step because they want to go straight to the sexy stuff. They want to go to sales, they want to go to marketing, they want to go to Instagram, they want to go to Reels, TikTok, all of this stuff. And then when they don't get that clear, they feel like, okay, what should I be posting? What should I be saying? Like, I don't understand, like, why am I not getting any sales? Or is this my right direction? I feel like I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall. And then they'll create all of this stuff, and then say they get clear down the line, okay, well, now they got to go back and they got to redo everything.
Right.
It's the foundation of your entire house. But once you have that, then everything else becomes so much more easy, so much more seamless. You're like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly how to say it. I know the structure and how to do it in order to help those people instead of it just being a passion idea. Because, you know, with the spirit without the body doesn't exist. You know, you got to have the body as well, you know. So I'm like, yes, let's take that spirit, let's put it in a body.
I love that. Well, I mean, I'm sure that you work with clients at the very beginning, but then you probably also work with a lot of clients who, like you said, go down that pathway without a voice. They get to a point where they feel like they probably don't know their identity, right?
Yeah.
They get to, I don't know if you hear that often, but they get to a point where they have a lot to give, but they don't know their identity. They don't know exactly how it's going to be structured. Is that when you pick up coaches as well to help them too?
Yeah, a lot of the time those are influencers. So those are people who they've mastered like how to grab attention from an audience. They mastered what works, but they don't know how to monetize it. So they're like, I don't know what even I'm doing, but I've just been doing stuff. And like, I don't really know, but I don't know how to make this into an offer. Like, I don't know how to actually help people further than just like fun content. And I'm like, let's get clear, baby. You know, so then we like, then that's a lot of just looking at where they've been and being, okay, what makes the most sense? Again, the relationship. What do you like? What are people willing to pay for? And then we create something beautiful out of that.
Yeah.
So those are usually the people that I work with that are a little bit more advanced, or they're also coaches that are advanced. Like they've been doing this for a while and like something isn't working in their business. They're like, I'm not getting the leads that I want, or I'm only talking to broke people, or like my sales aren't converting, or they're anything in their business that isn't working. I'm like, all right, first things first, we're looking at your messaging. Like we're looking at your niche. We're looking at your target market. How are you saying things? Who are you serving? How you're serving them? And it's so crazy. I talk to so many people who think that they're clear. And then we go back and they're like, I had no idea how fuzzy I was. I'm like, yeah. You know, like it changes everything. It's so crazy. It's the smallest thing that people skip over, but it's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, and you've referred to this a few times, which shows to me that you're doing this for just all the best reasons, is that as a coach, you could help a handful of people, right? As a coach, you invest your time into a client and then they pay you for that. I don't want to call it a service. Yeah, it's a service where you can only get paid for the amount of time that you put into them. And you do things outside of that, like you put together programs, I'm sure, or you put together things that can help them while you're not specifically one-on-one with them. But it's a very kind of unilateral way of making money or profitability. And it's also kind of limits you on how many people you can help. Now, you can get really, really good and you can split your time up like really amongst a lot of people, but eventually you get to a point where you can only split your time so many ways as a coach.
Oh, yeah. That's how I created systems so that doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, so I have a whole coaching program and I have coaches and I have other people supporting it, you know, things that are recorded, because I could not help all these people by myself. I would be so burnt out. And then if my juice isn't juicing, nothing have to give.
Yeah, if you don't have energy, then how can you pass that energy on, right? Because it's a transfer of energy, absolutely. Well, what I love is that you put yourself in a position where it's like it's two levels. You're helping coaches, which are therefore showing up for their people better.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, you're reaching thousands of people now instead of just the one-on-one people that you can reach before. And so I'm sure that kind of fulfillment has only gotten greater.
Yeah, it's very fulfilling. And it's a never-ending process. Like there's no way that I felt like I've arrived anywhere. I'm like, I just got here, you know, like I'm just getting started, you know, like there's so much that I can still learn, and I've come a long way, you know, like I was saying, scrolling back on my Instagram, I'm like, wow, I've come a long way. But, you know, I have so much more to go, and there's so many new things that are coming out, and I just love it. It's so fun. Not saying that it's fun all the time. It's a business. There's ebbs and flows. There's terrible days as well with anything, but it's a path that I've chosen, and I've just embrace it. And I'm just so happy that I found this path, because it was my biggest problem. I just didn't know what to do.
Well, maybe what's just a couple fun questions towards the end here. What's maybe a lesson that you've learned the hard way recently that you weren't expecting?
Ooh, recently. I would say just try things and be completely messy with them. Like recently, I just launched my first book, and I can't even believe it, because growing up, my dad would always make fun of me for not reading. I hated reading. I didn't like writing, all of this stuff. And all of a sudden I turned around just like, oh, let me just like write this little like ebook thing. And then it turned into a full book. And I was like, well, how the heck did I get here? I was like, did that just happen? Like, oh my gosh. And I just never, like, there's things that I feel like we hold on identities. Oh, I'm not a writer. Oh, I'm not this type of person. Oh, I could never do something like that, just because that's who you've been in the past. And if we hold on to those identities, it kind of never opens yourself up of who you could be or who you could possibly be. And that was just a eureka moment when I was like holding it. I was like, did I write this? I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is a thing. I can't believe it, you know? And so I think just like allowing yourself to just try things that you've never thought that you could because you identify with its opposite maybe. I think just leaning into something and feeling okay to try things, even if you do fail at them, and not like the cliche of like, try until you get there. That's true, but also you're going to try a lot of things that you don't choose ultimately. I've had so many past lives. There's so many businesses I didn't mention here today that I tried and I didn't follow through on because they just weren't for me, you know? So like, yeah, I guess you can say those technically were failures, but like good because I didn't want to continue them. You know, like I ended up here. So I think it's just allow yourself to just be open to trying new things, be okay if you got to stop and you got to pivot and try something else. You might surprise yourself.
Well, I love that. I mean, the book, when did the book come out?
It came out last week.
Dang, that's amazing.
Just came to the world.
How's it been going so far?
It's going so good. I gave myself the challenge of saying I could be Amazon bestseller, and I got it.
Amazon bestseller.
I can't believe it. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, there's a ring to it.
That's great. And so tell us a little bit more about your book.
So it's called The Niche Bible, and it's for coaches to help them find their niche.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's a workbook. So by the end of it, you got clear. Mm-hmm.
Is it like a workbook that you had been giving to your coaches for a long time that you decided that you'd make public for people?
No, it was actually something, it's just my training. So like, it's in my program. Like I coach this training when I get hired to go speak on other stages. Like it's something that I've done a zillion times. And I'm like, what if I just wrote it down?
Yeah.
And so I wrote it down. I was like, this is kind of a lot of words. What if I did something with all these words, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just my methodology, and I just created it in like a paper format because a lot of my clients go through this in the program. But some people like, okay, well, what if they don't want to come into the program? Okay, well, you can start with this. Like you can get super clear by the end of it. Like then you're ready to go, and it has the action steps of what you got to take to launch your coaching business. So you can do a lot of these things on your own without feeling like maybe you're not a place to like invest in coaching, but you still really want to do it. Yeah. Like this is a great place to start.
Start with the book.
Yeah.
I love that. And I guess at the book, like what's maybe like the first step that you kind of help people with in the book?
Oh, we do an inventory.
We
do an inventory on your life.
Okay.
Yes. Nice. It's a good look in the mirror. And we see, we're getting all super uncomfortable and then going into the mindset shifts that you have to have in order to move forward and really what to expect. Because in this journey, I mean, I was so hardcore into the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
So it's when your competence does not align with your confidence. So like in the beginning, your confidence is so high. You're like, I'm going to change the world, but your competence is down here. It's at the bottom. And then the more that you go, you realize that you don't know anything about what you just got yourself into. So your confidence goes down, but your competence goes up a little bit. And then over time, if you keep going, then your confidence will ultimately hit your competence. And then you'll be able to confidently do what you're doing and be smart at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. So it's just like starting in that place. And so it's helping people get both of those things. We're going to do a nice hard reflection, but we're also going to walk out with competence so that you know exactly what you're doing, so that you feel confident moving forward, and just a great place to start.
Yeah, you get them to that point faster.
Yes.
Right? Other than having to go through all the pains and hard pitfalls and things.
Yes, and I went through a lot of those.
That's why you're here to help. Well, I guess what's the next project or thing that you're most excited about going forward?
I think mostly it's that, you know, it's mostly, I mean, the book that's coming out, super excited. I mean, I haven't even announced that like publicly yet. I did like a private launch.
Oh, wow.
So like I'm going to be bringing like the paper one like to the world in like a month or so.
Okay.
So that's like my next checkpoint and whatnot. So I'm really excited about that. And then just being a good leader, I just hired my first like full-time team members in the past year. And so just like growing my team and being like, oh my gosh, you have a family? Okay, now I have a family. You know, like,
yes.
you know, so like, okay, now I got to make sure that you're taken care of and like I'm showing up for you. And like instead of, like passing the baton, like I was so happy to do that, by the way. I was like, oh, you want to do this task? Absolutely. Like some coaches or some business owners have a difficult time doing that. I'm like, great. So instead of me focusing on that, I'm focusing completely on you. What do you need? Let's do training over and over and over and over and over again. So just trying to be the best leader that I can. And so I'm able to grow this in a substantial or sustainable way so that I'm able to help as many people as I can deeply, because I know a lot of people that explode, because I've been in a lot of actually higher circles where I've seen that a lot of people, if they get like thousands, they're helping like lots of people at once. You don't get intimacy. And then people waste a lot of money, or they're not able to help the people that they want at the degree that they want. So I'm like, not today, So I'm like, okay, how do I grow this in a way where I'm able to help people deeply, but also create, financial freedom for myself and also my new family that I've just now brought onto my team,
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the major things that I'm focusing on right now. And getting on stages, I also host stages, or I also host events. So getting on more stages, which is just really fun. I love doing that. I'm on the computer a lot, so being in front of a crowd of a lot of people is very fun for me.
Yeah, most people would disagree with you, but I'm glad it's fun for you. We need MCs out there. We need people to do that. Well, I guess last question, as you're going forward, as you're working super hard on yourself and your business and so forth, what I always ask is, hey, you have to have a personal life as well, right? You have to have personal relationships too. How has the balance between growing a business and your personal life and your personal relationships, what are some lessons that you've learned from that are the most impactful?
Is make time, meaning schedule out the time. I live by my calendar, and so if things are not scheduled in, they just don't happen. So if I have time with my friends, my family, I schedule it out so it happens. Otherwise, I'm like, well, let me just do this one thing really quick. And now, I don't make time for people, and like, my parents are, they're getting older, love them to death. I'm like, okay, I want to spend as much time with them, or like my friends, my family. Like that's one thing that when people are at the end of their life, a huge regret that a lot of people have is that I didn't spend enough time with the people that I loved. So I want to make sure that that's a priority. And I've definitely been guilty of like, oh, well, I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for this. And then I actually put them to the side. So just making time for them. And I still try to be better at that, of not just on holidays, not just when it's special occasions, even though those happen pretty frequently, but just doing it just for the sake of doing it. I think just scheduling it out really helps to just grow and maintain those relationships, and just having that with a core group of people and not trying to be friends with the entire world, because that's you'll spread yourself way too thin.
Way too thin. Well, I love that what you just said there. What are maybe some red flags that you can catch so that way you're not falling into the trap of, hey, I'm doing this for them, but then also putting them to the side?
I think some red flags in like when that would happen, is that what you're asking? I think, well, one, if you haven't seen them in a while, and if they're asking, like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, I think that one's a huge one. Or if you really don't know what's going on in their life. Like, think about your friends or your family. Do you know what's going on really in their life? No? Maybe you should call them. Maybe you should just call them just to say I love you, or just to send them a text. That was one thing that I did when I was in Science of Happiness class, is that one of the things that make people the happiest is connection, period. And so that was a huge thing. It was like, okay, one of the things, I had like this bag where it was like, I made this assignment up because I was so like over the top in that class. And like I put all of these acts, or like all of these random acts of happiness, and I put them in a bag, and one of them, and then I'd pull whatever it was for the day. And that would be one of the things that I would do that day. And a lot of them that happened to be in there were like connection ones. It was like, connect to somebody who you haven't talked to in a while, that you haven't appreciated in a while. Give them a random phone call, random text. And they can be short too, by the way. A lot of the times we're like, oh, it's got to be, if I call my mom, we're on the phone for an hour, so like sometimes I got to just text my mom, because I'm like, I got stuff to do, but I think just like making time for it, and then also creating healthy boundaries around that too is really important, because otherwise, if I don't do that, I'll be at my parents' house for forever, because they're just like, stay longer. I'm like, okay, I got to go. But I think just creating healthy boundaries and just making sure that you're making that time. Otherwise, it won't happen when one day you wake up with all this money and all of this time that you have no idea what to do with. Then you'll spend time with them. I promise you, there's going to be there's always another level. There's always another level. As soon as I get somewhere, I'm like, but there's this. And then I put them to the side again. So I'm like, let's prioritize. let's prioritize. Put it on the calendar, make it a regular thing. It makes it a lot easier. And it's what you love. You know, we love people. We love the people that we love. So let's love on them.
I love that. Wow, you have so many things going on. I mean, we look really forward to the book releasing, I guess, publicly next month, you said?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. So that's going to release publicly next month. And then, yeah, I mean, just super excited to follow your career and like all the different things. I'm sure that we'll check in on you in about a year, and you'll be probably adding another project to your life that you didn't know existed and trying something new.
Oh, yeah.
But man, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with us all the important things that entrepreneurs can do to find their voice, find themselves, and really impact the most amount of people as possible.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.